here we are again. Another week of Outside the Cinema. 773 weeks straight. There's been Outside the Cinema.
Wow.
773 weeks. And don't try to throw that, oh, well, the show didn't download for for me for 3 weeks or whatever it was, because we did it.
Yeah, it was
it.
there.
But yeah, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Outside the Cinema, your weekly source for cult movie discussions. Your hosts, Bill and Chris, here again to work our review magic for you to either watch a movie you've already watched or something you weren't intending on watching anyway and still won't bother. So, I don't know if that helps at all. Does that, Chris? Does that help?
I don't know.
I think at this point I'm just doing the show to make sure I keep watching movies. I don't think I'd be watching anything if we didn't otherwise. We're knee deep into our end of year cram, trying to catch up on films from this year of 2022. So basically, we can fill out our top 10 list at the end of the year and not have been like, I watched 4 movies from this year. Because out of the 52 shows we do a year, probably 45 of them are all films that are at least 10 years old or more. So, and I don't have a lot of time to watch other stuff currently, at least. So, got to do what we can to get it in, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this week's episode, we are featuring 2 films, as per the normal. We are doing The Leech, which is the new film from Eric Penikoff, and The Sadness, which is a interesting Asian take on the zombie genre, with a number of other kind of side things happening.
Yes.
There's a lot of layers to kind of peel back in that, I think, when we get to it. Actually, I think both these films have a lot of layers to peel into. Inadvertently, these 2 films got put together, and they both they don't necessarily have the same themes because they're very different films, but there's definitely these are both films that have more kind of bubbling under the surface than what would first kind of be taken upon. You're just like, oh, it's a zombie flick. Oh, it's a home invasion flick or something like that. That's giving The Leech no credit at all whatsoever, calling it a home invasion flick. Could not be more wrong, actually, with what it is. But that's what...
Well, I mean, it is sort of a backhanded home invasion.
Sort of, and we'll get to it in a few minutes. But hey, listen, it's the time of year. If you like the show and you want to support it, Patreon is the best way to do that. It'd be awesome if you signed up and maybe bought the year membership going into the end of the year. When, got bills to pay, all those things to take care of. If you go to patreon.com/outsidethecinema and you sign up, you can do monthly, you can do yearly. I think you can do like 2 payments. They give you all kinds of options. The longer you sign for up front, the better discount you get. So keep that in mind. You get the shows early every single week there. And hell, some weeks you only get them there, apparently. So we've got our end of year music show coming up. And I think Chris and I are going to try to do a live broadcast for our top 10 of the year. Maybe even in the same room. We'll see. And we'll broadcast that probably most likely exclusively to the Patreon also. So we offer you stuff. Plus our show archive is massive, hundreds and hundreds of episodes, everything we've ever done, plus stuff that's only available in the archive. There's we say it's only available on Patreon, but there's stuff that's only available in the archive. It's not even posted on Patreon. So there's just thousands of hours of entertainment there. If you want to know about movies going all the way back, we've been covering random shit for 14 plus years at this point. So patreon.com.
Yeah, we go back to 1922 or something.
I think so, but patreon.com/outside the cinema is the place to go to get all that and support the show directly. All that money that we generate on the Patreon goes right back into keeping the show on the air. We basically use it to pay our let's be honest, almost all the money goes into our hosting costs. And then the other goes into internet costs, equipment costs, whatever else, we need to do. A microphone breaks or something needs to get replaced or whatever. I mean, we pay for the domain name out of there because there isn't OutsideTheCinema.com. I mean, it just goes to our Libsyn page, but it's there. And it's not free. So, yeah, if you could help us out, that would be amazing. If not, that's cool too. Just hang out for the ride and listen to the show with everybody else. Tight. You got anything you want to talk about here at the top of the show, or? And I haven't really I wish I had more going on. There's just I've been very we're editing. Don't forget to leave. So it's just been that's been my life from the second I get up in the afternoon until after dinner every night. So, well, yeah.
I'm just going to work and doing things.
Doing things, man. So. Stuffing things. I'm into it. All right, well, let's just get into this. I think because both these films, are going to have interesting conversations to go along with them. We are going to start with The Leech from 2022. Being totally transparent up front here, I am friends with Eric, the director of this. He's going to actually be coming on the show maybe later this week, and one of the producers, Scott, who I'm also friends with, will be coming on the show. So I am doing this review, with complete honesty, but I know these dudes. I really like these dudes. So I may have a little bit of a bias, may I say.
Okay.
But I will say that I met them when Eric and Scott worked on Sadistic Intentions back in 2018. Survival of the Film Freaks played with Sadistic Intentions in a number of places. Legitimately one of my favorite films from that year, maybe the best horror film from that year. Criminally underrated. If you've never seen Sadistic Intentions, definitely check it out. It also stars Jeremy Gardner and Taylor Zadke, who's now Taylor Gardner because they're married. But incredible film. Was very excited to see that this, and I didn't even actually know that The Leech was coming out until it's just the film fest stuff, dude. It's weird. The Woodsman got into Chattanooga and did its world premiere there, and The Leech, I believe, did its world premiere there too. Maybe it's not world premiere, but one of its early showings, and then was just kind of well, I guess we end up playing in a bunch of festivals together again. So, interesting. So The Leech is the new film from Eric Penikoff. It is it's of Christmas theme, and you could call it a Christmas horror movie, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a Christmas thing. Kind of like Die Hard, I guess. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? I mean,
no. This one actually, it could be Easter. It could be any of the major Catholic holidays.
Right, all about the religious holiday.
Because the whole thing plays up to his. He's got the big speech to do, the big sermon.
That's true.
And that can be Easter. That can be Christmas. I think it's only Christmas because having your heat turned off and a place in the cold is the best thing, the best way to progress.
Oh, and the lighting and everything kind of plays into it too. But I mean, it definitely.
Oh yeah.
This can fit into your Christmas horror films if you want. Very easily. It's not it's not a stretch.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So if you want to check this out, this is brand new. This was just released by Arrow a couple of weeks ago. It's available on the Arrow player. They also have a collector's edition Blu-ray of it, and you can purchase it through any other number of the normal major streaming services. But it's included in the Arrow player if you get Arrow, which is, I think, a streaming service worth every penny of the $4.99 a month or whatever it is that they charge. I buy it for the year, and I don't think about it again. So, all right, cool. Here's the trailer.
When we help others, we bring them face to face with God. Do not board up your homes for fear of God's little ones. They are his long-lost children, his flock in need of a shepherd.
All right. I mean, it's pretty hard to say that it's not a Christmas horror film when the trailer uses Silent Night as its theme. So, starring Jeremy Gardner, Graham Skipper, Taylor Gardner, and Rigo Garay. So I reached out to Scott, the producer, earlier this week, and was just kind of like, "Hey, we're going to review the film. Anything you want me to make sure that we include?" And he just wanted to make a point of, they did it during COVID, and it was like the smallest crew. Like, he's like, we didn't have more than like 8 people on set at any one particular time. I think he said it was like a total of 12 people from like start to finish. And there was like a number of times where there was like nothing but skeleton crew. And you would never know it by watching it. Yeah. So, okay. I'm going to kind of defer to you on this because I do have a personal attachment to this. Obviously we know we're both big fans of religious horror films, and I know you specifically love a good religious horror film. So why don't you kind of tell everyone the story and your initials?
My initials are CTB.
Yeah.
Well, what? Oh, I should have said that second. Okay. So the story is about a priest who reminds me of 2 or 3 different people, but he's none of them, none of those actors. Who
Father Dave, played by Graham Skipper.
Yeah, who is sorry, I'm trying to I'm trying to mitigate a problem in one of the theaters at the same time. So this guy is a priest in a church with no one that comes to it, which is pretty much a story of almost every church except the shitty mega churches. So that's not the point. The point is either through circumstance or manipulation, the 2 main characters here meet Beardy McBeardface and Rickety Cricket. Basically, this is, as I was watching this, I'm like, this is an origin story. This is the dark version of how Matthew Mara became Rickety Cricket on Always Sunny, because this motherfucker shows up and introduces him to a bunch of things. So basically, I'm going to say basically a lot.
That's fair. That's fair.
He's trying to, he's trying to not just preach the word of the Bible, but live how Jesus would, by taking in the less fortunate, by helping people out and requesting nothing back, just doing things out of the goodness of your heart, which, I mean, if you ask me, people are just going to take advantage of, because this isn't a story where everything works out great.
Right.
So it's the one guy who is a bit questionable, a little bit sketchy, but he's supposed to look like that. And he was the main guy in After Midnight, which was an interesting psychological romance thriller, I guess.
Yeah, Jeremy's been on. We featured on the show a bunch because he was the main star in The Battery, which is kind of where he was kind of best known.
Yeah,
from. He also had a part in Spring. He had a small part in Off Season, which we did earlier this year. He was also in Bliss, which we featured last year. He was the lead, one of the leads in Sadistic Intention. He was in Psychopaths. He's been in like him and Graham Skipper.
Yeah, he's good.
Him and Graham Skipper are both like 2 of like those genre actors that we have now, that show up in a large number of things. Sometimes they're the lead, sometimes they have a lesser role, but they always tend to really kill it and like knock it out of the park. And Joe Swansburg is the other one that I always like. Those are the 3 guys that, like, if you see that one of them show up in a movie you're watching, you're like, all right, there's going to at least be something really good about this.
Yeah, because you would trust that if they've been in a bunch of stuff you like, then they've read the script and it's in line with the stuff you like. So that's always a good thing. I like that.
Normally, yeah.
Makes them dependable. Yeah. So everything goes okay, I guess, a little bit, except for Smoking in the House and like the most annoying metal music I've ever heard. It, like, I can't even get my mind on a beat on any of the songs, which I guess is the point. He's just, this dude is just chaos. He's the if it was Dungeons and Dragons, you'd have, lawful good for the priest and chaotic evil for this guy.
I don't know what any of that means.
Basically, like Superman on one end and Carnage on the other.
All right, okay. You're speaking too high a level nerd for me. I'm like, you need to speak nerd, but just bring it down 1 or 2 levels. So you got Kirk, right. Captain Kirk, and you got Khan over here, right? Is that what we're talking?
Yeah, Khan is more, I would think, chaotic neutral and just looking out for himself.
Oh, fair.
And Kirk, Jesus Christ, there's nothing lawful about that guy. So what happens is then we're introduced to his girlfriend,
Lexi.
Yeah, who we are sort of led to believe we met earlier through confession. But the priest is putting things together and coming to conclusions that probably aren't there, but kind of does make sense in the course of the movie and the amount of people this guy interacts with. It's a little strange.
Yeah.
To him.
It's what's really interesting about this movie is how they kind of lay out this very simple story of Father David taking Terry in because he has no place to go. His girlfriend's kicked him out of the house, and but there's a lot of questions that are raised when you start to really look at it. You're like, well, where did this guy come from? And then he was like, oh yeah, if you could just take me home to my house or whatever. And he's like, oh, it's 20 minutes away. And he's like, all right, cool. He's like, all right, it shouldn't take us more than 30 minutes. And it's like, well, now it's 30 minutes away. So how did he get to the church? Why is he at the church? Why is that where he ended up? And then all the clothes are the girlfriend's throwing all the clothes outside and is basically like, see ya, get out of here. I don't want you around anymore. And you're like, well, this then when you kind of start to see it all starting to come together, and I talked about layers, there's your base layer of simple, and now, okay, well, there's another layer of all these questions on top of that of is this really as simple as you think it is? And then as it kind of plays itself out and he kind of starts to leech in on everything, which is obviously where the name of the film comes from. And he's not a fully unlikable guy. He's just he comes off rude and of a different world.
Yeah, it's because he's told don't worry about everything, and you don't have to pay me back. And normally people don't really take you up on that.
Right.
You know, it's like, oh, you're staying here. Don't worry about anything. Nobody ever just throws their feet up and has coffee.
Right.
But this guy does. And I sort of have a hard time, even getting mad if that was the instructions he was given.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like Father David is very but he even from the first moment you meet him, I mean, I'm looking at the dude with a side eye almost immediately. So there's also the character of Rigo, who is in the church in the beginning when Father David is doing his sermon for that week, and then him and Rigo are speaking afterwards. And that there's kind of a weird dynamic in the relationship between the two of them, but you don't know what it is yet, or if you're just reading too much into it. But so that there's that kind of thing where I was just, immediately anytime I see a Catholic priest in any movie at this point, I'm immediately okay, well, this guy, there's more going on with this guy than we know, because that's just how it is. And that's how it is in real life. And it's kind of interesting how that kind of starts to play itself out within the story. But so the character Terry, who's the guy that ends up moving in with him, he's very forward with Terry in terms of yeah, you can come and stay with me, get yourself figured out. And is just doesn't really set any rules or any expectations. It's not oh, you can crash here tonight, but you need to find a place tomorrow or whatever. And Terry's character is very astute to being okay, well, this guy's not setting parameters for when I need to get out of here. So the next morning he's calls the girlfriend, and then well, we don't know if he calls the girlfriend. She just kind of shows up. But we know that they're communicating. And then
Yeah.
That's right after there was the scene you were talking about with Father David in the confessional and the voice of a woman with a heavy Southern accent, talking about how she's
almost like she was trying to disguise her voice.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too, about how she's pregnant. She doesn't know what she's going to do. Should she have it? Should she not have it? So we run into the whole pro-life argument from the church of all life is sacred and all of that.
And inside a church, that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. So she shows up to the house, and now Father David is kind of stuck because he hasn't laid out expectations. And then they're like, well, is it cool if we stay here through Christmas until we kind of figure it out? Lexi's going to go for some job interviews, and he's given, it's interesting because he's given a number of opportunities to be like, hey, I got to run this church. It's not really in the best interest. I can, you guys can crash here tonight, but, I need to make sure, you guys are out by whatever. Like, he doesn't set that expectation. Is it because he's lonely? Is it because he's got ulterior motives? We don't, at that point, we don't know.
Yeah. Soon we do know, though.
Yes. Because as we said, he is a Catholic priest, and there is always more to the story.
Yeah. It's kind of boring on his end, actually. What he wants to do. I mean, all he wants to do is convert him and get people in his church so he can survive at the job he's doing.
Is that what he really wants, though? Without spoiling anything.
On the surface, it's what he says he wants.
On the surface, yeah. And I think that's what he believes he wants. And again, we get into the idea of faith and religion and how, as humans, we're flawed. Even if you want to follow that to the T, your own personal desires are not necessarily going to align with what the expectation is. And that's where I think the real heart of the story and the soul of the story comes from. I don't know whether when they were making this, they were, hey, what are you doing? Lay back down. Do your dogs ever just go to town on the carpet? What
do you mean? Licking
just
it?
Scratching the shit out of it.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of non-carpet, but yes.
Okay, fair. Anyway.
Yes.
I don't remember. I had a good thing going there, and the dog screwed it up. All right.
You were talking about how you don't trust priests.
Oh, well, yeah. No, I don't trust priests. Plain and simple. But we learned that, Father David is also taking this guy Rigo under his wing. He's helping him. I love when they're they're practicing their music, and Terry's like, oh, so it's like rap. And he's like, well, it's not really rap. It's more like melodic hymnal flow or something like that. And he's like, okay, sounds like rap to me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But
they don't want to say it.
So we see,
but that's what it is.
We see the first kind of possible kinks in the armor or cracks in the facade when they're talking about Rigo, and he's like, oh, I met Rigo in a, and it's so funny when he says it because it's very obvious what it is. And he's like, oh, I met Rigo in the bathroom of a truck stop stall. Yeah. And he's like, oh, really? That's where you met him? And he's like, oh, no, it's nothing like that. And then he's like, well, what were you doing in a truck stop bathroom? So those are the first ideas that okay, so maybe Father David is not the good guy that we think he is.
Well, I mean, was Rigo underage? That's the part I wasn't clear on because that would solidify my judgment on the whole thing.
I think they left it kind of like that to make you question it because he could have been, because we don't know. I don't remember if he said exactly how long, but we don't know exactly how long he's known him, how old he is currently. But it's that whole, again, going back to the whole idea of the expectation of religion and faith, and the expectation is that you're not homosexual in the Catholic faith. And the thing is, if he's just a guy and he's going into a truck stop bathroom to get his rocks off with somebody, hey,
a consenting adult.
More power to you. Like, but that's the idea with the religion of like, well, it goes against his religion, so he shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
So it's
which then always leads me to the question of, do they really believe, or are they in so deep now that's what they're doing?
I mean, the human psyche is a hell of a thing, man. Hell of a thing.
I know. But how you can spout stuff that goes against who you are, how you can support that is surprisingly beyond my comprehension.
Oh, absolutely.
Or unsurprisingly, I guess. Like voting for Herschel Walker, and that's all I'm gonna say. I'm not gonna take it further than that. But that's, really.
Really. A lot of people did. Anyway, so I don't want to
1.7 million.
I don't want to give. Here's the thing: they didn't vote for Herschel Walker. They voted against the Democrat.
True, but the vote against the Democrat was a brain-damaged man who has no idea what's going on around him and would rather be a werewolf than a vampire.
I'm sorry. Anyway, let's get back to the movie.
He said that out loud. He was talking about Underworld.
Yep.
Underworld.
I know. So
like it was real.
So I don't want to give away too many specifics because the film is so new. So we'll just say that some things start to happen. We start to hear some voices. We start to see some shit. Is it supernatural? Is it not supernatural? Is it a mental illness thing? Is it all of the above? Some crazy stuff starts to happen in the final third of this movie. And this movie just really which started, I mean, it's kind of a slow burn for the first like 45 minutes or so, I'd say. But once it starts to ramp up, it really starts to ramp up in terms of like the, there was a specific word I wanted to use. The, not necessarily intensity, but like, I'll use intensity. It gets more and more intense as it goes until it kind of builds to its, what it would be like its final solution. And it kind of leaves you wondering exactly what went on, what happened. And, we've had a really good run lately of films that don't over-explain themselves. And I think, when they were making this, they really wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of decide exactly what happened. But at the same time, if you want to watch it and take it for exactly what it is, you can do that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you think? Like we've kind of talked a lot about the specifics, but like, what'd you think? Because I know movies like this for you can be a hit or miss. So
yeah. I'm not 100% sure on this one yet, because generally when you get into horror movies that are built around religion, there's a supernatural element because religion, inherently brings that with it. In this one, it wasn't. There's nothing supernatural unless I'm missing something.
Well, there could be though. That's the thing, is there really could be.
It's really subtle though, isn't it?
Doesn't matter though, it's still there.
It's so like small. I honestly can't remember what you're referring to.
Well, there's a couple of parts. There's the voices. There's the voices. There's the voices in the confessional.
Yeah, which could just be another person, but then there was the other voice, but that was after he had ingested a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, could be. But again, and there's a couple of other things, and again, I don't want to give them away, so.
Yeah. Okay. This reminded me a little bit of a movie I watched called The Great and Terrible Day of the Lord. And that was that was about convincing one person that the person talking to her was God. And it was very interesting, and it had kind of a little bit of horror elements to it and stuff.
What was that flick that we watched a couple years ago with the guy that said he had the devil trapped in his basement? and it kept like trying to get them to unlock him. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was called, but
I Trapped the Devil.
Very aptly titled, I Trapped the Devil.
Yeah.
That was excellent. I remember. It was so excellent that I couldn't remember what it was called. So, but I do remember really enjoying that. And in a weird sort of way, this film, I think, kind of has some of the, obviously very different in, the way it's shown, but I feel like there's definitely like that kind of element of, is it real? Is it not real? Is Terry Terry? Is Terry somebody else? Is, who's Lexi? Like, and like, where did they come from? And like, there's more going on than I originally had thought there was going to be as I was watching it.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because like for me, I don't want to cheer. I'm not on the priest's side, obviously, because he's using their situation and his hospitality to manipulate them to join his church.
Yep.
Which is wrong. If you are speaking the truth, you don't need coercion to bring people to the word.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, these people are just using him at every possible turn, and the rickety cricket thing was sort of a joke, but not really, because they definitely try to bring him down to their level, which is I would describe their situation as Florida light.
Florida light, okay.
Florida light. They're not doing Molly every day, but they're definitely not sober.
Well, I mean, Terry's drinking pretty much every time you see him, because there's the point where Father David basically is like, hey, listen, if you're going to stay here, there's no more drinking during the day. There's no more heavy metal music. If you want to listen to music, I got a box of gospel tapes downstairs you can check out. He's very much doing the dad thing of like, you've been running wild for too long, so I'm taking away everything that you enjoy.
And like every bad parent that does that.
But at the same time,
he waited way too long to do it.
But the interesting thing too is at the same time, Terry's not like, well, I'm fucking out of here then. Like he doesn't have to stay there.
Right.
Which I think pours itself into the other, like, I'm the devil aspect of this.
See, that's an interesting thing, because I think both sides could be.
Oh, for sure. And again,
in this.
They don't give you the answers, like they don't spell it out for you, which in this film I thought worked very, very well. We've watched a lot of movies recently that I'm like, no, I want those fucking answers. This one, I don't want the answers.
Yeah, this is almost like an ethical litmus test for people. Like, do you agree with this part, that part,
right?
Whatever.
It's like that show they did on ABC. The What Would You Do show, where they would present a real life scenario, and if you were the person that was there, what would you do?
Yeah. This show called basically Broadcast Anxiety Attack,
or or Are You a Piece of Shit? Like was the other title you could go with like that. So it's not what would you do? It's
how much will you tolerate? How much will you tolerate for a burger with crispy bacon?
If this old lady fell down the stairs, would you walk by her? Are you an asshole? Like,
I mean, what happened before that?
Not the point.
For me, it is. Great. What led to it?
All right, Chris, do you recommend it? What is your grade for The Leech?
All right. Having only watched it one time, I feel like I want some of the parts to be tightened up and more definitive, but I understand what kind of movie was being made and how that's not what I'm going to get. So that doesn't matter. I have to drop that. You hear that, everybody? Just tell people that when there's something that they didn't expect in a movie, that's the movie. Tough.
Deal with it. It's there.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to give it a B. I enjoyed it, but I'm not, I need to watch it again because there are subtleties and story beats that I think didn't register as important at the time. And a second watch is going to help that out.
I mean, I think that's pretty good, though. I mean, the fact that you want to watch it again.
So,
like, you know what I mean?
No, I don't know if I want to or if my brain's telling me I need to.
I see what you're saying.
You know, like you need to have a definite decision one way or the other about this kind of thing is what I think what my brain's telling me.
That's fair. All right, a B. So, even with my handicap of knowing the filmmakers of this, I did really enjoy it. I think Eric's writing in this is really top notch. Even better than Sadistic Intentions was, and Sadistic Intentions is like an A- movie for me. So, like, just to give you an idea of like what that coming off of that, I don't think this is quite as strong, but it's also in a very different world. So it's kind of not fair to. It's not like he made a sequel in where you can directly compare it, or like he made two different slasher films that are both of the same ilk. This is a very different film. I feel that the writing in it is very strong. I think the acting is very strong. I like the way it's shot. The soundtrack is a little hit or miss with like the bombastic heavy metal stuff that kind of comes in. But overall, I really enjoyed this. I'm going to give it a B+. And bordering on an A-. I think it's one of the best films I've seen this year in terms of like the religious horror stuff, and has very strong potential to end up on that top 10 list at the end of the year. I'm a sucker for religious horror movies anyway. So when you get one that can kind of mix in that like aesthetic of questioning everything, I think it's always going to be something that's going to be an interesting watch. Do I think this is a movie for everybody? Probably not. I think you need like, we talked a lot recently about like your passive horror fan. I don't know if your passive horror fan is going to get out of this what your hardcore film fan's going to get.
I don't think that your everyday mainstream horror fan would consider this horror.
Okay. I mean, I do though. I definitely do.
This is, I mean, technically this could just be a straight drama. I mean, you could, but that's.
Whoa, Nelly!
Oh, hold on a second while I die for a minute.
Whoa, Nelly!
Nah, I'm at the point now with whatever where I get this. It feels like just a flat layer of phlegm on the back of my throat. So like you try to cough to get it out, and it doesn't move. So it takes you by surprise. So what was I saying?
I don't remember.
Drama could
straight
be a
drama,
drama.
not your everyday run-of-the-mill horror fan.
Oh, the thing about horror is you have action horror, you have thriller, you have mystery stuff. Like horror and sci-fi are a wider genre than drama or comedy, I think. So, because you can have a horror like Silence of the Lambs, or you can have a horror like what we're going to cover next.
Yeah.
And they are both horror.
I will say, too, that I think
nowhere near each other.
I think The Leech fits in very well with your Christmas horror film list. Like, if you can add this to the rotation with, Black Christmas, Silent Night, Deadly Night. I mean, those are obviously different types of films, but, like, it fits right in with, like, Better Watch Out. What was the one we watched last year with the girl and the girl and the boy in the house? Was that You Better Watch Out?
Yeah, it might be. Yeah.
Either way, though, fits right in. It's got the Christmas feel to it. It works. I recommend it. You can watch it on Arrow Player as part of their streaming service, or you could purchase a physical copy of it, or go to like AMC or not AMC. Go to Amazon Prime or any of those places. Apple Movies. It's available everywhere. So there you have it. All right, next up here, as you said, a very different type of horror film. This is a Asian flick of many layers. It's a Shudder exclusive, The Sadness. Here's a trailer.
我一直以为，如果我不去烦别人， 就不会有人注意我，也不会有人伤害我。直到今天我才知道，不是这样的。
病毒不会降低他们想象力，反而会让他们想出最可怕的行为。
我找到你了。
All right, The Sadness, a Shudder exclusive, directed by Canadian Rob Jabaz, which is, I think, is very interesting. He's done a lot of his work in China and Hong Kong, but he's a Canadian citizen and grew up in Canada, which is an interesting look when you think about this film as you start to watch it. The Sadness in it boils down to basically you have a couple of Jim and Kat. They are trying to get back together and reunite amid a viral outbreak within the city that they live, which basically turns everybody that it infects into this. It's kind of Rage Zombie from 28 Days Later, but they still have their wits about them. So
yeah, they're not zombies, but basically what happens is the limbic system, if I remember correctly, is disengaged. So it's more akin, I think, to the audio virus from Pontypool. That it makes you do things. So the idea is you know full well what you're doing, what you want to do, and what you're going to do. But the reasoning part of your brain can't stop it from happening. That's how far gone you are into an animalistic state of just wanting to do things.
Yeah. So
it's grim.
This is a very dark movie. But it starts off in the morning with the couple, Jim and Kat, just kind of getting their day started. It's, fairly mundane and simple. He's watching the news on his phone at one point, and they're talking about this virus, which is they're trying to say they need to make sure that they're basically trying to put a stay-at-home order on, which is, of course, if you want to talk about that with China right now, that's a whole big thing going on right now. And, it's obviously thinly veiled to be a COVID thing. And they're talking about the possibility of the virus mutating and all these different things. But again, nobody's really taking it that serious. But the doctor's, ranting and raving about how we have to take it serious. I don't know if that sounds familiar to anyone or not, but they're laying that plane down right off the bat to let you know. The neighbor next door is outside watering his plants when Jim's standing on like their little terrace there, and they're just kind of talking, and he's like, "Oh, are you sick?" And he's like, "I've had a really bad cold for a little while. I just can't seem to shake it. No big deal though, or whatever. As long as I'm getting up every morning, it's fine." So he drops his girl off at the subway station to go to work. She's got a work meeting that she can't miss, and he's gonna go do his thing. He talks about how he must be a cameraman or something like that, because he talks about how they were supposed to go away, but this guy that he works with wants him to come and do a shoot when they're supposed to go away. So he's talking about how he doesn't have a whole lot of work right now, so he's got to make sure that he goes on the shoot and stuff. So all your basic beats you need.
Yeah, there's a little bit of confrontation between the two with like, "Oh, you know how hard it is for me to get time off. I don't get that much, blah, blah, blah." But they all seem kind of okay with each other.
Yeah, it comes off very much as the like normal bickering that a couple will do.
Yeah, like I get it, but I'd rather we didn't do that. But whatever, fine.
No, I thought it worked.
So it's to show that I will reference it later once we get past a certain point.
Right.
Because I think their relationship is very important to how things progress.
For sure. So he drops her off. He decides that he's gonna. So there's a point where he's standing on that when he's talking to the guy, or right before he talks to the guy on the terrace outside. He sees this old woman standing on the roof of her building, just like looking off into nothing and just kind of standing there motionless. And he's like, he looks at it and he's kind of questioning it. And then the neighbor comes out and then she's gone. So he's on his way back to the apartment. He decides to stop and get something to eat, or he stops to get a cup of coffee. And the old woman comes kind of like staggering into the little cafe that they're in there. And one of the guys in there asks her if she's okay. He's like, "Hey, Granny, are you all right?" And she attacks him.
She spits in his face, right? She like throws up or something.
I thought she
on the
bit
first
him.
dude.
I thought she bit
She
him.
bites somebody.
And
Like
then
she
jumped
definitely
on him.
attacks two different people. Yeah.
Yeah. But so this is your first look at what this virus is, and her eyes are all red.
All puffed up, her gums
and
are
red, yep.
fucked up. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
It
now
looks
we're
like
off and
it
running.
infects. Yeah, it looks like it infects all the soft tissue in the face. Because it definitely transmits to you through a bite, so it would transfer through tears and blood and all that.
But I think it doesn't only transfer its way that way, because there's a lot of people that seem to get it all at once. So we're led to believe that whatever that virus is that they were talking about, this is the mutation that they were scared of. And it's mutated to people that may have had it already and it's turned into something else. But basically, just like any, horror movie. And the one I think that you can compare this to closest is 28 Days Later. In terms of like, once everyone gets it, like, you better fucking run. Like, get the fuck out of there, because everyone's running after you. And they're just attacking each other. And there's like a weird sexual element that immediately comes into play. And it's just like a free-for-all. So he gets himself back to the apartment, and the neighbor is now turned, and the neighbor breaks in and cuts his fingers off. The neighbor comes in with a pair of shears and cuts Jim's fingers off. And so he's trying to get in touch with the girlfriend, but he can't get in touch with the girlfriend. And then we cut to where the girlfriend is, and she's on the subway.
Right.
And in one of the grossest scenes I've seen in a really long time, there's a guy on the train. He's wearing sunglasses. He's infected the whole time watching him. And then he immediately just starts stabbing people. And then he's attacking everybody with it. They finally hold him down, but then somebody else starts going. And it's like a balls to the wall. Everybody fucking it's so much blood. Like, this is an incredibly gory movie. Like, one of the goriest movies I've seen. Definitely the goriest movie I've seen this year, I think. But it's like over the top with the amount of blood and the amount of like shit, like intestines hanging out and like people biting each other, and like it's like really fucking hard.
Yeah, when the first few people got stabbed, I thought, oh, they're actually showing, like, when you get stabbed that deep, like, you bleed an incredible amount of blood, like a scary amount. And I'm like, wow, they're showing an actual real, like, representation of what, and then he gets stabbed in the neck and is basically like Johnny Depp's bed I almost said Nightmare Before Elm Street.
Oh, it's story of Ricky O, pressurized Asian, like blood flow.
Yeah,
like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it hits a certain point where it's like realistic violence, and then it's like, oh yeah, boop, and it's like, I see the line, fuck your line, and jumps over it.
Yeah, I mean, which
is good.
Yeah,
which is
definitely
good.
It's very much in line in terms of like those over the top gore, like Tokyo Gore Police.
Yeah.
Those Nagoro Obushi movies that are just like so over the top. But this is over the top, but it stays in that hard, dark area. It doesn't get comical or like ridiculous.
No, the only thing comical is like the amount of gore. It does hit the ridiculous point, which is the only saving grace I think, for this. Is it going over the top with that stuff?
So just prior to this guy going nuts on the subway, Kat is sitting there just reading a book, and there's an older businessman, probably in his mid-50s or so, sitting next to her, and he's just trying to chat her up, and she's not interested in talking.
Clearly, she's reading a book.
Yep.
He makes a point of asking her about the book.
And she's at
So
first
he
polite.
knows.
She's at first polite of like, oh, it's just, it's a book I'm reading or whatever. And he's like, oh,
thanks,
okay.
fuck off.
Yeah, but then he says to her, oh, you probably want to keep reading. And she's just kind of like, yeah, I do. And then he just like keeps bugging her. Oh, what, you think I'm doing?
Yeah, he's like, oh, you don't see people reading books. It's like, fucking shut up.
So this dude's turning. Like, because he's already agitated.
All right, so here's the thing. This is what I think. You have different levels of people. You have the immune, and you have different levels of people that are susceptible to the virus. And it all depends on what you think of women. Because he was the first one to change after the stabby attack.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we're looking at is a virus that obviously we're working on mental faculties. So if you are already at the point where you will yell at an innocent woman for not talking to you and think you're owed something, basically this is an incel virus. And the more incel adjacent you are, the quicker you turn. That's what I
buy into that 100%. I was watching it, and when I saw him start to get agitated, and I was like, okay, well, we know he's gonna get the virus, but we don't ever see him get attacked or anything. So
No.
I think,
but he is splashed with blood,
right?
So
Right, maybe whatever. But you knew that and this is where you get your first real idea of the difference between what your standard zombie movie does and what this movie decides to do, because this guy's holding a fucking grudge, and he's going to get this fucking girl because she was the one that slighted him. So one of the guys attacks another girl on the subway and stabs her in the eye. And Kat does what she can to help this woman. They stop. They get out. They're able to get out of the subway, and now this businessman is chasing them through the subway, and she's trying to help this girl. So they get to the exit, and the guy from the subway is closing the exit. And it's an obvious thing where like he looks at them and sees them, and then goes and closes the exit anyway. And they are just like by like a split second able to dive under the door, and this guy's standing there now, and they're like, "What the fuck, man? You're gonna lock us in there?" And he's like, you can tell it's like, well, yeah, he should have waited, but at the same time, he's like, hey, the police told me to close it. I didn't know if you guys were sick or not. Like, I don't know what's going on.
You're covered in blood. Fuck you. Their arrogance with him doing he's a coward. He's definitely the Upham, if you want to go with the Saving Private Ryan character. Sure. But he did what he was told to do to save other people's lives. I don't hold that against him at all. In the instance, I can see why they would, but he doesn't know. I mean, the woman has her eye ripped out of her head, and they're covered in blood. So fucking come on, dude.
Yeah,
but he doesn't. I mean, he's a piece of shit.
Well,
anyway,
coward is the complete word for that. So so they're like, well, where's the hospital? And he's like, oh, it's this way. So they all go to the hospital. They get to the hospital. The police let them in, then they lock the door behind them. And the
glass doors, you mean?
Yeah, the glass doors, right? And so they get in there, and the hospital's like, well, the ER's closed, and they're like, well, she's injured, so they get somebody to help her, and they're just kind of like, everyone's got to stay here. We don't know what's going on. Everything's crazy. The whole everything. A guy. They talk about how one of the police officers started stabbing everybody in the police station. And we're just waiting. And so they do a news conference on the TV, and they watch the news conference. And this is the one part in the movie where I was like, this is fucking stupid. So they have like the president of Hong Kong or China gets up there and does his little speech about, we're going to overcome this. stay indoors, do everything you can, be safe, all the political right things to say. And then he turns it over to the head of the army or whatever it is, and he's talking about it, and you see that he starts to sweat and he starts to get weird, and then he starts to talking about things that he wouldn't be talking about. And then you see him turn and he grabs the president and he takes, because apparently he's just got grenades with him at a press conference.
Yeah, you can do that around high-ranking officials.
Takes the grenade off his thing, takes the pin off it, shoves it in the president's mouth, and blows his head up on live TV.
Yep. Yep.
And you're like, okay,
why not?
Well, then you're like, okay, well, everybody's fucked.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah. This is that apocalypse movie. Everyone's fucked. No, like, there's no way you're getting out of this.
Right.
So then, obviously, the infected show up at the hospital. They, break their way in. She's able to borrow.
Oh, it's business guy who sees her through the window.
Yeah, and then a bunch of others show up and they break their way in, and then they have a blood orgy, which is disturbing as fucked.
Yeah.
Because they start killing a bunch of people, and then this is where you start to see the sadistic sexual desires coming in, where there's rape, and there's just like this deviant, like over the top, like mutilation and sexual torture, and just like all at once too, man. Like this shit just hits you all at once.
Yeah.
But this is also where, with the businessman, we start to see the agenda that Rob Jabaz is starting. He's peddling here, which is not. I'm not saying agenda in a bad way, but it's like the political part of like the toxic masculinity that we have in the world, and he's very much like using that, especially that businessman of like, well, you said no to me, so I'm gonna fuck you up because nobody says no to me because I deserve what I deserve, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. And it's layered in there pretty. I mean, there's no hiding it. He's purposely not hiding it, but it's a really interesting way, I think, to present that. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. And not to mention too, I mean, it's not just men, because the first person that we see is an old woman who looks to be, we'll say boomer age, Trump voting age.
I would say
right?
65 to 75 in there.
Yeah, there you go. So there's boomer. And that would be someone who in society generally is stuck in their ways and only believes certain things. And, everybody can be stereotyped into certain things that, can push your story forward. And I think believing women as lower and are only there for blah, whatever it disgusts me to even talk about it.
It's the worst, man. It's the worst.
It's the kind of thing that makes me think that, the boomer mentality of I got mine, fuck you, kind of plays into this whole thing. It's almost like the toxic traits that people can have it's just repackaged anger from other places, and it's played off really well here because who you infect and how they're affected and how long it takes is interesting because there are characters in this that get infected that take a long time to change. And I honestly believe it's because of the way they feel about another person in the movie.
Yes, and we could probably get to that part now.
Okay.
So Kat borrows the coward from the subway's phone, and sends a text message to her boyfriend, and he's able to get the call, and she's like, "I can't unlock the phone because it's not my phone. So you can only call me and I can answer," which is a really like, I was wondering how they were going to get around with that, because how many times do you see in a movie where somebody gives somebody a phone and they just open it up and use it? Like, it's like, and I'm like, no, every single cell phone, it has a passcode you need to use now. Like, there's no, like, if it's a Face ID or it's a passcode or it's a thumbprint, every phone on the market is locked unless unlocked by the person that's using it. So I thought it was interesting that, like, he unlocked it for her, but didn't give her the number to unlock it. And I was like, okay. And then she does something pretty interesting too later on with her breath, and she breathes on it to see where, and is able to figure it out on how to unlock it. But it was smart, and it came later on, so it wasn't like an immediate thing. But so she talks to him, and he's like, listen, I'm on the outskirts of town. I'm gonna get to you, and I'm gonna do my best to get us out of here. So he's also now run into a number of instances of there's that part on like that basketball court where they were beating the shit out of that guy, and which gives a really interesting, our first real insight into the virus, where it's like this group of kids that are like a soccer team, like something, and like they're beating the shit out of this guy. They got him all tied up. They're hitting him with a baseball bat. They wrap a bunch of barbed wire around the pole and then pick him up and run him crotch first onto the pole covered in barbed wire. It looked like a fucking New Japan death match or something.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting because like Jim chases these guys away, and then he does this guy, unties him, and the guy just looks at him and he goes, why did you let them stop?
I was so close. He's getting off on it.
Yeah.
And that was the first hint, I think, in context, aside from creepy businessman just wanting to get back at the women for slighting him. This was the first of the sexual content, I believe.
At least the first like overtly thing.
Yeah.
So I think what is so interesting about this aspect of this movie, which is very different than most other, I'm not going to say that it's the first time anyone's kind of tackled it this way, but what I think Rob Jabaz does as the director and the writer in this is he's able to walk this line where he's able to show you all of these different things, but the one thing that's taken away that is usually the first thing that comes up with people and their sexual desires, because it's so closely aligned with your emotions and your emotional drive, is that he takes away this fear and stigma from people indulging, which I think is a really interesting aspect of why the disease works the way it does, because we all know like everyone has desires and everyone has different desires, and most people are afraid to show those and they fear being judged for what they're into. So it's really an interesting idea that this is a disease that takes all of that away in the way it's presented. It's fucking brilliant.
Because it's actually kind of like The Purge
in a weird way. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're free to choose what you want to do. Like,
it's like the personal purge, because it's a personal thing for each person.
Right. So in The Purge, some people obviously would murder people. Me, I would rob banks. That's the level I would be at, because I could live with that afterward, But it's kind of like this. It's like, oh, do you want to just kill a bunch of people or just sit at home and jerk off all day? Or do you want to, reenact part of the end of a Serbian film? That's where the movie lost me, when businessman and wheelchair girl with the missing eye met up.
Yeah, and we don't need to get into that. And I also, again, this is fairly new. I don't want to give away too much stuff, but as it kind of moves on, we're reintroduced to the doctor from the news at the beginning of the film, and so a few other things happen. How much do you want to give away with the relationship between the two of them?
No, I think if people are interested in watching this, they should get a bunch out of it.
Cool. Well, anything else you want to put in before we grade?
Yeah, when I say I gave up, I mean like I'm like I can't pass this movie. That's the point I was getting at with that. I really it just so I guess play the music.
All right. All right, Chris.
That's not music. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I mean, I could play some music if you want.
It could be music, but yeah.
I mean, we'd have to do it by the. I didn't have it queued up the way I wanted it to. Do you recommend, and what is your grade for The Sadness?
I can't with the content of this movie, I don't know who I could recommend it to be honest. The movie hits a certain point and I just realized this movie is not for anyone. I like the idea of what The Sadness is. I like the reason it's called that. It's a dumb name for it, but I get it. I understand what they did, but I think there's some stuff that just went on too long, and it just I totally get what they're going for. This movie is supposed to shock and disgust you, and it does, but as a film critic, I guess I gotta say I don't see why we need that kind of stuff to be made. Just, hinting at it a little bit more probably would have been better for me.
Okay.
I don't know. It crossed a line with my decency filter.
That's fair.
Which I don't really have.
Would you put it in a level of like a Serbian film or like a Cannibal Holocaust or like August Underground, one of those films that are just like too much?
I think if you were to skip one scene, it would be okay.
Okay.
The scene that I'm referring to that just turned me off to the whole thing, I know why it went on too long. It makes total sense why it went on too long. I wasn't in the mood for it. So otherwise, it's well made. They clearly blew their budget on blood. The special effects or physical effects look nice. The story is a little predictable.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the way that this thing just disgusted me, like, I understand you have a disease that is going to take away all rationality, but come on. I don't know. I've said before that movies with content that just disgusts me have to get an F. And I really think that part didn't need to be in the film. So I'm going to stick with it. There you go.
Okay. Here's the thing. I agree with you almost 100%, but I am on the opposite side of the fence. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
And we've been through this before with films like this. I'm not what I would call a gorehound anymore by any sense of the imagination, but if something that is done so purposefully, you know what I mean?
I do.
That it's done so much so that, like, okay, I get you did it on purpose. You did it on purpose. I don't have to like it, but I get it. I think the acting in this for the main actors, especially the female lead, I thought she was excellent.
Yeah.
The pandemic storyline I thought was good. Again, not necessarily something you've never seen before.
Yeah, I'm getting tired of the virus storyline.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I read a little bit about this, that they had started to work on it like during the pandemic, and originally it was partially funded by like a cam girl. Like,
oh yeah,
like I couldn't find any additional information on that other than
that's what I had read too.
Yeah, I think it was in the trivia, so I don't know any. But a cam girl had used a bunch of her money to help get this off the ground, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I think the effects are good. I mean, there's a lot of blood. And the plus though is it's all practical. Yeah, I don't think there's any computer generated stuff going on in this. I think it's all practical effects. Like, there are buckets and buckets of blood. Thought it was shot well. I liked the way it looked. It was colored really like vibrantly when it needed to be, and then it was more drab at other points. Music was cool.
Can't argue any of that.
Yeah, it's also loosely based on a comic series, which I have not read, and I had it in front of me here, called The Closest, which is a series. It's I think essentially like the Chinese version of The Walking Dead is kind of how it looks. Okay. But I mean, yeah, there's some really reprehensible stuff in this when you start to peel back what exactly is going on. I feel like the really like gross stuff is needed with that grain of salt with what he is trying to say. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing is the male toxic masculinity thread, which is, and I feel like his idea was like, listen, I'm going to beat you over the head with this. Like, and I'm going to make it super uncomfortable and you're going to fucking hate it because that's what it's like to deal with it. And I'm like, okay, I don't like it. And that scene you're talking about, no need for that.
No.
But at the same time, with what he's pushing, there's no need for any of that. So take it for what it's worth. I am going to recommend it. It is dark shit, though. It is dark. There's no feel good. Spoiler alert. There's no feel good ending.
This is an end of the world event, basically.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to see if they decide to do a sequel, where it goes from there, because I feel like this is one of those ones where like it could go either way. It could be a really interesting take for a sequel, or it could just be garbage. So I'm going to give it a B for blood. But it's not. It's heavy. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea.
No. I would say maybe 10 people out of 100 would like it.
I think our fan base and our listeners and our friends, even if they don't like it and they agree with you, I think would do well with watching it. Because
I think our listeners, it would be about 50-50.
50-50. Scott had talked about this a little while back in one of his segments. He had watched it, and he kind of felt the same way. He felt kind of between you and I. I think at the time he wasn't really sure how he felt about it, but he was like, it's real dark. When you start to kind of peel the layers back at it, it's fucking really deep, dark shit. So, but it's, you know what, made for a really interesting conversation. And I'm glad you and I talked about it, because I think these are the movies that our listeners kind of need to know about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, again, whether you like it or not, hey, I get it. You might hate it, you might love it, but this is the type of filmmaking that I don't think we see enough of right now. Everything is too safe, and everything is too like pussyfooting around things. This movie does not pussyfoot around anything.
No, it doesn't. But it also takes situations and multiplies them by 1 billion.
True.
So
not like we've ever seen that before.
No.
All right, let's move on here. So Joe is starting the Amityville series. And him and I were talking this week. We were kind of going back and forth, and he was like, I found 17 films. And I told him to use his discretion. And so he said, he's still deciding what he was going to do, or maybe just go balls to the wall and just make it like the witchcraft series and just do Amity films for the next year. I told him, I gave him an idea. I'm like, after you watch the first like 2, like put the rest of them in a hat and then just draw. And then he said he did some additional research, and he's found up to and including 33 film titles that have the word Amity related to them.
Wow.
Luckily for him this week, no thought required. The original Amityville Horror with your boy Josh Brolin.
Yeah, the originals.
Well, hello, Bill. Hello, Chris, and hello, OTC Nation. It's your boy Joe here, and this week Bill took me from definitely not Chicago to New York, because he made me watch the Amityville Horror, 1979. Now, I don't know why I don't typically do this, but in searching for this movie, I first accidentally clicked on the 2005 remake, which made me do the, wait, what year was the first one made? And I was almost right. I guessed 1978 and was 1 year off. And then I remembered 1979 was also the year that Alien came out. Quick curiosity-based Google search, and damn if 1979 wasn't an absolute banner year for horror films. Check it out. Alien and Amityville Horror, obviously, but also The Driller Killer, Human Experiments, Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, one of my personal favorites, John Frankenheimer's Prophecy, perennial USA up-all-night favorite Tourist Trap, The Visitor, the movie that made babysitters up their rate and make sure there was only one phone line in the house when a stranger calls, Lucio Fulci's Zombie, the OG Phantasm, and love it or hate it, the TV movie Salem's Lot. Like, if that's not one of the better years for horror films, then I guess I don't know what the fuck either of us are talking about, and I'm just going to go find someone better to talk to at this imaginary Christmas party that I just made up in my head because I do that sometimes. Full disclosure, I haven't seen this movie since, I don't know, maybe the early 90s, maybe even the late 80s. And the thing I remember most is that this is a great example of how uncomfortable 70s clothing looked.
Yep.
I seriously think that growing up loving movies from the 70s is the reason that I never owned a turtleneck in my entire 45, almost 46 years of life. Like, why would I want to go about my day being very lightly strangled? But, you know, there's a movie to watch here. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk about the 70s. So the Save the Clock Tower lady from Back to the Future is the realtor for the scary house where Ronnie DeFeo killed his family. That's the only real thing that happened in this based on a true story movie.
Yep.
It's like, this entire movie based on a true story is based on what happens in the first 30 seconds of the film. Anyway, George and Kathy Lutz argue. They argue about spending $80,000 on a house in Long Island that is probably, I don't know, 3,500 square feet on the water that has maybe a full acre and a half of land. $80,000. Bear in mind that this is 1979, not 1939. Very early on, we get one of the most famous scenes in the movie. Rod Steiger plays a priest who comes to visit the Lutz family on the day they move in. First off, do you remember moving into your current place? Would you have wanted some schmuck in his 60s who doesn't know what manual labor feels like and probably won't lift a box just bombing up into your spot and probably just to ask for 10% of your wages? I didn't think so. Then when he gets no response at the door, instead of walking away and coming back later or just, leaving a note, he just lets himself in and starts walking around like he's the one who dropped $80,000 on this dump. Then he shuts himself in one of the rooms and just assumes they're okay with him performing a blessing on the house. Like, if I ever came home to find a priest had broken into my spot and just started doing his mumbo-jumbo voodoo bullshit in my home, I'm going to grab the water bottle that I have next to my plants and treat him like a naughty cat. Spritz, spritz, no. No, that's a bad child molester. Go away. Get out. And as he does his blessing, like thousands of flies. I'm sorry, Bill, Chris, I'm sorry. This is going to be like 2/3 of my review because that's where my heart and my whimsy is taking me right now. He's doing his blessing and thousands of flies fill the room. Like, gee, thanks, Padre. Now I gotta call Orkin or whatever to deal with like the 2 hefty bags worth of flies in my crib because you thought it would be cute to appease your imaginary friend without my permission? Are you going to pay for this? Is the church? The creepy voice is right. Get out, dude. Oh, and you puked in my driveway. The hose is over there. I better not see a speck of the body of Christ on my driveway. Okay, I'm done. Sorry,
Okay.
I really took that personally in that scene in the movie. Okay, something yet somehow even better just happened. George sneaks out to the boathouse. Oh yeah, did I mention that this outrageously priced at $80,000 house has a goddamn boathouse? He sneaks out for a smoke and a cat jump scares him. I'm sure this was like a brand new thing 44 years ago. It wasn't a trope then.
No,
but
it was.
Clark, for those that might not know, that's my cat, was sitting next to me, and this cat's howl, the Foley on it was so much louder than everything else in the movie, sent Quark like halfway to the ceiling, and now he's just chilling on the bed in the next room. Way to go, movie. The only thing you've scared so far is my cat. The whole rest of this movie is basically everyone putting up with James Brolin becoming ever more erratic. Like, at the start of the film, he's an even-tempered, loving dad and stepdad, and within like 2 days, he's like a paranoid, grumpy, just an overall dick. But everyone just kind of puts up with it. I'm sure to Catholic people or even just religious people in general, this would be a much more impactful film about how demonic influences change people and, would maybe be scary. To me, this is a film about a man who is supporting a family of 5 who bought way more house than they needed and constantly has to deal with New Yorkers, and he just can't fucking deal with this bullshit anymore. Like, this whole thing could have been solved if George just, secretly gathered up some cash and, dipped to Puerto Rico to become a bartender at a beach resort that doesn't file paperwork. I just had the moment that doesn't bode well for a film. They're at a point where the third act should be, full-on ramping up to the finish. The Lutz family just, ducked to and made a fiery comeback. They get cut off by Satan, a couple of false finishes. And then I looked... Bill, Chris, I looked to see how much time was left in the movie. 30 goddamn minutes. The grand finale is they leave. They just drive away from the house. Here's the thing. The good, James Brolin does Descent into Madness pretty convincingly. If you dig the late 70s aesthetic, this is definitely your movie. And the mayor from Jaws has a cameo in a scene with Rod Steiger, and they both have a scenery chewing competition that is off the fucking charts. The bad. You mean apart from the stark reminder of how property value has changed in the last 40-ish years? It was 2 hours that should have been a tight hour and 20. And also, in order for any of this to be scary, you'd have to believe in demons. Also, only 3 people in this film actually sound like they're from Long Island. Pass-fail, Amityville Horror does pass, but by a pretty slight margin. It was okay. I get why it was popular at the time. Hopefully next week they know how to keep it tight as I watch Amityville Horror 2, The Possession. Until then... be great. You know what? Don't be good. Be great, everyone. Happy holidays.
I remember when I had revisited the original Amityville Horror a few years ago, basically being like, yeah, this is not nearly the classic that I remember it to be.
Yeah, at the time it was something different.
Well, and it's definitely got a very specific feel to it, which is, I think, is what gives it. It's got that 70s horror feel, like. You know what I mean? Like certain films that just have that feel.
Yeah.
But I mean, knowing, that it's all fake and the story that I always felt like what Amityville Horror had going for it was based on a true story. And then when all the shit came out in probably the early 90s, that it was all just made up to try to keep him out of jail or whatever. And then the dude canted on his deathbed that all of it was fake, completely.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Kind of, I think, changes the idea, but I don't remember Amityville 2 at all. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Joe has to say about that. So, and maybe Joe, maybe include whether it's something that's worth revisiting too. For some of these older ones. I know Amityville 3D had Meg Ryan in it and shit, so we'll see. All right, anyway, speaking of Meg Ryan, here's Reverend Scott. When I posted last week's show, the Patreon link in the Facebook group, people were like, hey, we haven't gotten a regular episode on the feed for 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
Hey, you should sign up for the Patreon.
Exactly.
Everything was available on the Patreon, no problem.
Fuck all you guys.
Go fuck yourself.
What?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. With Reverend Scott. I think we're going to do Amityville Horror.
Oh, no.
Hey there, Bill and Chris. This is Reverend Scott.
My good, handsome friend.
1 out of 2 ain't bad. And welcome back to another edition of Reviewing Reviews, featuring Incantation and Something in the Dirt. Remember those? Doesn't matter. I'll remind you, although I might need a little reminder myself about Incantation, because It was like only the 859th Netflix movie to drop today. Tell us a little bit more about it, Bill.
We'll see them holding a camera, and then there's like 3 other angles in the room, but we know that the person's by themselves in the room.
Yes, but what about the plot?
Every single found footage movie that I watch, Deadstream gets better because it did all of those things properly, and every movie I've watched since then does them poorly.
I mean, fair enough, but wasn't there like a curse or, I don't know, some other shit going on?
It really kind of essentially ends up exactly where you're going to expect it to end up. So,
Chris, do you have anything for me on Incantation?
Fuck this.
So I guess I'll just give it a C or something. And I give the review a B-.
All right, that's done.
And it's just as well because I'd much rather talk about Something in the Dirt. Knowing that it's a Moorhead and Benson flick, I had to watch it before listening to your review. So I did. And before I watched it, though, I did check out the trailer. I think it was probably the most perfect trailer for this movie that you'll ever hear. Let's take a listen.
Yeah.
So here's the trailer to their newest feature, Something in the Dirt. That's not the right button. Again, Jesus Christ. Oh, now there's going to be an ad.
Yeah, of course. Wouldn't it be funny if it was an ad for the movie you want the trailer for?
No, it's like a Mazda. I love that commercial. All right, here we go. Why is there no audio? Damn it, man, Scott's. Damn it! And then the site, and then the friggin' app just crashed.
Of course.
I cannot win. Scott's gonna have a field day with this one today, right? Oh man.
Starting right out, even had I not known it was Moorhead and Benson or what they looked like, I still don't think I would have ever not realized it based on the look and feel of the movie, and it'd been like,
who did this? Like, where? Like,
they had a noticeable chemistry and play off each other very well. I think their acting has improved since The Endless. And while I agree with Bill that the first, 45 minutes to an hour isn't crazy eventful, I was pretty hooked. I mean, I really liked all the intrigue and all the things that just started adding up that I'm just like, okay, I feel like we're getting all these puzzle pieces. You know, I can't wait to see how this puzzle gets put together. Every scene, you're just thinking,
a lot of the shit they're spouting doesn't make sense.
Because it's Moorhead and Benson. I mean, I expect it to all eventually connect and become clear. But then you hear that one line, why did you play yourselves in the reenactments? And you're just like,
oh no.
I can't trust these guys. Now you're finding out that they went through multiple editors for this documentary, leaving for ethical reasons. And there's a special effects guy that was involved that doesn't want to be shown or really heard on camera. And while you're seeing all of these ideas loosely strung together, numbers like 1908 used to tie events, or sketchy math equations, or just the fact that the closet was hotter than the rest of the room and there's a strange fruit growing on a cactus that make them suspect it's all due to the climate change coming from a doorway to another world, you're also kind of seeing behind the curtain sometimes, seeing them reenact events, seeing Levi confront John about things that he's been lying about the whole time. And then there's one thing I noticed that while an editor was speaking that struck me kind of odd, that later made more sense. She says, back when John was in control of the film, suggesting that he no longer was in control of the film when it was finished. Like, I don't know, maybe that man that they hired to be the one that was supposed to be objective no matter what, maybe he was controlling this film, and this is what we got in the end. Was there really object floating? Maybe. I don't think they could actually afford the special effects that were locked away until they were paid for. but I don't think it was quite as spectacular as they wanted it to be.
So yeah, we're going to say that it does more than it does.
So by the end of the film, I had more questions than answers. But that's exactly what I think Moorhead and Benson wanted you to have.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Some of it may have happened.
Right.
All of it may have happened.
Right.
None of this might have happened.
Yes, Bill. So as far as your review, I give that an A. I enjoyed it a lot. And not just because I knew the movie you were covering, but it also helped me digest it a little bit more. And although at first I was a bit disappointed in Something in the Dirt, because it wasn't exactly what I wanted, the more I think about it, the more I appreciate what they did make and how they presented it. But it's no Endless, and it's certainly no Spring, which is my favorite. So I give the movie a straight B.
Fair enough.
Well, that's plenty enough for this week, but make sure you all tune in Outside the Cinema next week when Bill realizes he has to hear about another Amityville horror and hear my segment too.
Oh, okay, gross.
And when Chris thinks about that same fact, he just takes his earphones off.
This doesn't apply to me.
All that and so much more that doesn't apply to you. But until then, peace and love, guys. Holy shit with Reverend Scott.
Where is all of this coming from?
Yeah. I just gave up and went with it. I stopped thinking about it.
Well, there you have it. Another week. Another show. Go to our Facebook group at just go to groups, type in Outside the Cinema. It'll be there. Follow Chris and I on social media at OTC Bill and at Cthulhu. I think that's it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So next week, I know we're doing that Ultraman movie that Chris got. So we're doing that, and I don't know what the other one is yet, but I'll figure it out soon. Patreon.com/Outside the Cinema. Everyone have a good week.